Running a business. It sounds exciting, right, listeners? Bigger teams, bigger revenue, bigger impact. But behind every growth chart, every shiny milestone, there is a human story. The late nights, the self doubt, the tension in meetings that no one talks about, the energy we carry, the ego we wrestle with, the emotional load that we hide. That's where the real challenge lies, not just in systems or strategy, but in ourselves. Today, on this episode of the BizBlend Podcast with your host, Sana, listeners, we are diving into that very human side of scaling. And to guide us, we have Rani Dabrai, serial entrepreneur, certified EOS implementer, and someone who has built multiple businesses from scratch, danced with burnout, and come out thriving. She's got an uncanny ability to hear what's not being said, to read a room, and to help leadership teams get unstuck, aligned, and energized. And listeners, interestingly, Rani blends practical business tools with candid stories about mindset, about ego, and EQ, yeah, emotional intelligence, showing us how to scale without losing that spark that made us start in the very first place. So, everyone, buckle up. This conversation is as much about business as it is about being human. So, Rani, welcome to the show, and it's really an honor to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me, Sana. It's great to be here. I love your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rani, for your words. And to begin with, I mean, you have scaled multiple businesses. It's easier said than done, and work with hundreds of leadership teams as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I would love to understand, like, from your perspective, what is the most common human factor that trips up a growing business?
I would say both individually, which tends to roll back up to collectively, but definitely self awareness and the lack thereof. So if people aren't aware of and aren't open minded as well to being able to be willing to change, if they're not aware of themselves, if they're not aware of their own limitations, their own mindset, and if they're not open minded to be able to change it, they can't grow, and then your business can't grow because you can only grow to the degree that you can break through your own ceilings. And then if that happens in a team, one of two things will happen. Either you'll have one person who's just blocked, or you'll have a whole team who are collectively burying their heads in the sand like ostriches and not willing to just put in the little bit of effort it takes to change to break through whatever ceiling they've hit in their business. So I feel like if I could shake any of my teams, if I could meet any of the people that I work with and shake them by the shoulders and say, "Hey, listen, see what look in the mirror. Look in the mirror, and if you're stuck in your business, it means you're stuck in yourself."
Wow. I think that's a very interesting perspective because normally, whenever we imagine an entrepreneur stuck or having that flat line in the growth or scaling of a business, we always tend to think that he or she will go back to the boardroom, look at the metrics, and it's kind of a number oriented approach that they look at to kind of understand the root cause of the problem. But I think what you are mentioning is something very, very human. And was there any moment, Rani, or any particular misstep early on that taught you this lesson the hard way?
Oh my God, there's probably loads. I think I remember really early on, learning that I couldn't scale. I couldn't scale my first business. I couldn't get past one, two, three people
Okay.
until I learned to trust and let go. And I mean, there's all sorts of different layers you can go with that, because if you really go really deep, you have to look at where do your trust issues come from. Why would you need control? Is it about control or is it about trust? What is it about? But I learned early on that when I hit my first ceiling, I mean, the first natural ceiling any of us hit when we're growing our businesses, if we go from, whether we're going from corporate employment to self-employment, or moving from self-employment to, U plus one, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, the first ceiling anyone's going to hit is the ceiling of time. And in order to break through that ceiling, you need to learn how to delegate, and you need to learn how to build a team around you. And crucially, stay in your lane. I mean, we're not all good at everything. The self-awareness is around, what am I good at? What do I truly love to do? And how can I truly serve and be of value to the world? And stick to it, and then hire the best people in all the other things. Put them around you, but stay in your lane and stop trying to, micromanage and take people over. And for me, I think my early lessons were around that because um, and ironically enough, the first business I started properly was a virtual assistant business. So, I mean, I think sometimes you keep meeting the same person until you learn the lesson, right? So I think you keep meeting the same business until you learn the lesson. So I really quickly have to start eating my own advice. I had to really start listening to myself and say, well, what would I tell my clients? I also have to tell myself, get out of your own way.
Yeah. I love that line, stay in your lane. I really love that line. Uh, and I think um, this is really, really crucial because, and as an entrepreneur, as founders, rejection and failures, they are um, inevitable. And some founders, they really see failure as weakness. Um, but I think what you are saying, you know, we have to look at it as more of a pivot point, as lessons for growth. And that direct
Yeah.
translates into the growth of our company or whatever we are doing, trying to build.
hmm I completely agree. I feel like when you receive any kind of feedback, whether it be good, bad, or ugly, you have to be willing to listen to it and equally not take it personally. I think that when you're an entrepreneur, I believe that entrepreneurship is not about the I, it's about the we, and it's about being of service. So many people will start and then fail in starting their businesses and getting their businesses off the ground because what they're thinking about is how much money can I make rather than how many people can I serve. But when you're thinking about serving people, it's about becoming the best version of yourself and creating the best possible value. And when you're thinking about doing that, I think it's really important to be willing to change and be willing to listen to feedback. And if you take that feedback and make it personal and make it about yourself, then you're just living in a place of being fairly egoic. But if you take the feedback and choose to use it to improve, change for the better, or really serve better, I think it can be. I think it can be pivotal, and it can serve as an inflection point in any journey of life, not just business.
Exactly, exactly. And also coming to the another aspect of your life, burnout. I think especially in the world of startups and entrepreneurship and being a founder, I think it's a silent epidemic in here. So, how do you help leaders recognize the early signs in themselves, or maybe even make them aware about it, and also their teams, before it becomes a full blown crisis?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I feel like burnout is sometimes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The harder you work, the more burned out you get. But the more burned out you get, the harder you work. Um, and a pattern that I see quite frequently is that people get burned out because they're on the wrong wheel. They're on the wrong hamster wheel, solving the wrong problem. A lot of leadership teams that I work with and individual entrepreneurs that I work with, what they tend to do is they kind of circle the airport of symptoms rather than landing the plane at the root cause, because the root cause of the issue usually requires a difficult conversation or a thorny, you know, situation that you need to figure out, or maybe there's resources or whatever it is, right? And it's being willing to address 36 hours of pain for a lifetime of peace, or just be constantly living with all the symptoms because you want to avoid that 36 hours of pain. And I think that you get burned out when you're chasing the wrong things. And then when you're chasing the wrong things, you don't feel as passionate and you don't feel as energized. And so then you're going to work harder because you feel that you are working, but I always say, you asked, how do I help leaders? I just always remind them, what's the why? What's the purpose behind all of this? What is the reason that you're doing this? And how do you, does the thing that you're doing today really move the needle on your bigger purpose, your bigger reason? And if it doesn't, then change what we're doing, because then you won't get burned out. I also think that there's some very practical tips that we have to be aware of, and it's back down to this self-awareness thing. And actually, just before we started recording this, Anna, you and I were talking about it in terms of, working long hours and all of that kind of culture, that hustle culture. And I think it's a fruitless endeavor, because I think as human beings, again, the ceiling that we bump into is time, but we have to be very self aware of how we're hardwired. Are we a morning person or are we an evening person? Do we like to be with people or do we need time by ourselves? And whatever it is, it's okay. We have to embrace it and then arrange our work and our life around it. Because when you do that, you provide higher quality output in exchange for your input. You get, an outsized return for your input. But if what you're doing is showing up and just, you mentioned about going by the metrics. When people are chasing metrics rather than meaning, of course you're going to get burned out because it means nothing. So I think it's about connecting to your bigger why, being very self-aware, plus understanding, how do you measure what done looks like? When is enough enough? When are you actually hitting the goals that you need to hit, that are serving that bigger purpose?
That's very well put, Rani. Very well put. And I think, why am I saying this? Because it not only connects with the listeners who are um, currently, entrepreneurs or founders or business owners, or who may be in the future, but it connects with everyone. Everyone.
What?
I have personally faced, encountered situations, moments in my life, when I was working super, super hard, but I couldn't understand, why am I doing this? Couldn't find the meaning. And that eventually, physically translated into burnout. And I didn't even realize it. So,
Yeah. And the thing is, I think if you do what you love, there's that whole thing that if you find something that you love doing and you'll never work a day in your life. I mean, yes, that's true on a very high level. But the inverse is also true. If you find yourself burning out, there's a signal. I mean, stress is a signal. Burnout is a signal. You have to pay attention to the signal and instead ignore the noise. If you listen for the signal of what is your burnout telling you, what is it telling you about your business? And I've seen it, and this happened to me as well, and I've seen it with so many entrepreneurs that when you get so stuck in the detail and the weeds of your business and you don't take the time to take a clarity break and you don't, hover out 30,000 feet on a fairly regular basis, what happens is you actually start to resent that time you're putting in, because it's time that's taking away maybe from you, from your family. You start to have all these, none of the freedoms that you were seeking when you went down the path of entrepreneurship are coming true. Instead, it's feeling more and more locked in. And then you start to resent the source of that, which is your business. And when you can't take distance and when you can't take a break, you fail to see the value that you've built up in your business. And instead, you begin to attribute every negative feeling and every item of burnout. It's the fault of the business. Actually, to my mind, I think it's the fault of not taking enough space and seeing what's really going on, seeing the wood from the trees.
mm, true. That is so true. That is so true. And it's definitely, it's a cascading effect. It's a cascading effect. And um I also think that, it once again goes back to what we discussed initially, staying in our lane. As
Yeah.
a founder, as an entrepreneur, um, we kind of, have this hesitation to surrender or let some things go, out of our hand, out of our control, deliberating, delegating, or putting systems in place, people, who are expert in doing that, in place. So I think this beautifully goes back to, what we started the discussion with.
Hmm. It does. And I do think there's you asked, how do I help leaders? One of the other things I'll say quite a lot, and I say it to my own team, is just this really simple sentence, which is who, not how. Most people, um, they kind of back themselves. They paint themselves into a corner of thinking, okay, well, here's my never ending to do list. Here's all the stuff I need to get done in my business. How on earth am I going to get this done? And they try and think that throwing more time at the problem, um, throwing, maybe some money at whatever it is, putting a new system in place. Let's buy a new CRM, or let's, figure out a new to-do list system, or let's start a new Notion wiki. All of those things are going to help. Actually, the quickest thing that helps is thinking, okay, rather than how can I squeeze this into my already limited time and energy, why don't I look for the right who? Because the thing that you hate is for sure someone else on the planet loves. So let's find the who. Who can do the thing that I am not great at doing? And what's the thing that keeps me in my, my absolute joy, the stuff that I love to do, the stuff that I'm naturally good at executing on? How do I just stay living there and find the who to fix everything else?
Yeah. Yeah. And, we also had mentioned the word energy, even
Yeah.
all in the podcast, we were talking about it. So you have mentioned that misaligned energy and unspoken tension in teams are critical hurdles. So,
Yeah.
was there a particular team or project in your journey, Rani, where this became painfully obvious?
Um, I think in my own so I can use I work with so many teams and confidentiality is huge. So I'm always going to use my own examples.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the best examples I can use, there's not probably one, there's several. But in general, what I found is for me, misaligned energy manifests itself quickest and easiest. It's easiest to see when everyone is working from the same set of core values. So for me, energy comes out in how people behave. And the stuff that people don't say is way more powerful than the stuff that people are saying. So it's about being curious about that. And in my experience, I found that when team members have joined my teams, any in any of my businesses, when they've joined my teams and it's not been a person who is aligned with the core values of the existing team or the business as a whole, it is the first place that a misalignment of energy comes up because it's the first time when people don't, they become afraid to say what they really think because they're in a core value environment that's just not matching theirs. And the quickest thing that happens when you have a business and you run it and you really hire and you run it from a value perspective. So when the people around you, they don't need to be the same as you, they don't need to believe the same things you believe, but they definitely need to have the same core values as you. So when the people around you and you build a business and they are the same core values and someone joins and they're different core values, if they have a complete misalignment, that's when stuff comes up, and it comes up the quickest. It comes up really, really early. And I mean, I remember one person that joined our team
Mhm.
quite some time ago now, and she was a really lovely girl, really, really nice girl. But one of our core values in my little team is we call it just say it, which is just whatever it is you're thinking, just say it. It's a completely safe environment. Just say what you think. If there's stuff flying around, if there's the elephant in the room that no one's talking about, we're really not going to move forward. So we have to just say it. And that means that, no one's afraid to say, actually, I can't do this, or I really need more training, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm at capacity. It doesn't really matter what the difficult truth is as long as it's out there. That's how we feel about it. But this particular girl had joined the team and she just wasn't capable of doing some of the things. She didn't have the skill set to do some of the things she was assigned. But rather than saying it, she kept pretending and she kept avoiding and she kept missing deadlines. And the issue got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it got much bigger than it needed to be because the irony was that if she had just said it in the first place, if she had followed that core value and if that was truly within her, then we could have given her the training and the skills and she would have still been on the team. But as it was, she had to leave because she created an environment that was just full of, there was a lack of trust. No one had any faith in anything she was saying. And if we didn't catch it quickly, what would have happened is her lack of adherence to our core values, because it just, again, it wasn't her fault. She wasn't a bad person, but it just wasn't in her. It would have infected the rest of the team.
Yeah.
And we caught it before it did, but that's because we're overt about our core values. We call it out every single day. And so I think that if you if you have a core values aligned team, the best way to avoid a misalignment of energy and avoid any hurdles that come up is to make sure that you're living and breathing the core values every single day.
I think that's a very tricky, space to navigate, Rani.
Yeah.
The confrontation, um, because once again, it's a new team or maybe a fairly young team. So sometimes it can, words can really create a lot of misunderstanding.
They
So,
can, but it's interesting that you, and I hear this a lot actually. It's interesting that you use the word confrontation because I hear that a lot. I hear actually a lot of my teens will say to me, this it feels confrontational. And I'm really, really quick to call it out. Actually, it's confrontational if you confront the person. But if we all just calm down and take a step back, and it goes back to being of service, what is it we're here to do and why? Why does this business exist? Why are we pursuing this course of action? Why did we sign up for this life? Um,
mm,
well, if the issue is the issue rather than the person, then it's just all the emotional charge and all of the negative energy leaves it because we're not attacking people. Like I said, this one in this example I gave, that girl was just a perfectly lovely girl. And if all she had done was say, I don't know if I can do this, I didn't see it as being confrontational. So I think a lot of mistakes teams make is that they confuse the issue with the human, and they're two separate things. And we have to be very clear about that because we all deserve kindness and compassion. And not everyone is perfect. We're all, no one's invincible, no one's infallible. We have to, we have to accept our flaws because we're human. And then we have to be able to just say what's up and not see it as a confrontational conversation.
exactly, exactly. Oh, that really hits hard. That really hits hard, Rani. Um, and um, now you're also talking about scaling and growth, but you have
Mm.
also successfully exited businesses. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, a full journey here, which starts with the growth and then exploring the very human side of the scaling and growth, where a founder specifically, um, it starts with the founder. So you have had also like hilarious fails along the way, Rani. So looking back, I'm really curious to know, like, which fail taught you the most about yourself as a leader, as a human?
My God. Wow. There is so many. I've learned I've made so many stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
Which failure taught me the most? Mm, I think
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, take your time, take your time.
Mm,
I-
I think, well, you know what? There wasn't any well, if I look at this 30,000 feet, right? I know so many entrepreneurs who do this as well, but I am hardwired as I'm hardwired as an entrepreneur, which means I have tons and tons of ideas, and I'll wake up at 3 in the morning and I'll have a brand new idea, and have breakfast and I'll have 20 ideas. And my poor team, they will tell you over all these years that they are sick of me. They are well, they're not sick of it now. They're used to me going, "Oh my god, I've got this great new idea. Let's quickly do this." Thankfully, we've got a system in place now that is kind of like a horizontal bungee around me and my crazy ideas. Um, but one of the things that I know I do a lot of is as soon as I have an idea, I'll run out and I'll go ahead and I'll buy the domain name for whatever this idea is. And oh my God, there have been some humdingers. Like when I look at my account where all my domain names live, there are just some crazy ones. But when you buy them, you sign up, and I usually think, well, let's just grab a bargain and sign up for it for 3 years. And then I'm sitting on all this ridiculous domain name real estate, wasting money, costing me money every year. But when I look at it's just interesting because it paints a picture of some of the stupid and actually some of the good ideas I've had. But it's also something you can't do everything. And again, you have to pick your thing. And saying no to saying yes to some of the awesome stuff means like amazing stuff means saying no to some of the stuff that's good. And that's actually some of the hardest decisions we have to make. So I used to say yes to everything, and now I have to really protect my yeses because the more I say no to is how I protect my yeses. Um, so I think that it's not any one failure, but all the stuff that I haven't gotten finished has taught me that I really have to believe in something before I go running with it. It's probably a sign that I need to stop buying domain names, um, but yeah, definitely saying no to more stuff means that I can say yes to the stuff that I really care about. But when you say yes all the time, like I was doing in my early days, you block all of your time for the future. So it's protecting that time and energy. And when I look at all these domain names sitting in my account, I realize that it's taken me a long time to learn that lesson, but I think I finally got it.
Wow. That's quite a good one. That's quite a good one. And I think that's where also, yeah, specifically those, it could be maybe in your leadership team or your, people, like the most trusted ones, they also help in kind of giving that reality check or course correction.
Mm, mm.
But this may not work out. So I would suggest you to steer clear of that. I think that is really, really required because sometimes, founders they really get obsessed with the things they're doing, they're building.
Well, they get absolutely obsessed, and that's the point. Um, it's good, right? You need the obsession, but you don't want the obsession in an island either. You have to be willing to hear, feedback and input and what's really going on. So I think that's equally important. So you want to harness that. Um, you want to harness the genius of like visionary thinking. You want to be able to get that, but you also want to temper it with reality, and then, as always, align it to your core focus and make sure that the thing that you're saying yes to is also in keeping with your longer term picture.
Right, right. And before we wrap up, I think this is very, very important. So you have created it's a proven framework, EOS, that, you help businesses with to scale, but with sanity. So if you can give our listeners, a quick glimpse of what exactly EOS and how it works.
Yeah, sure. So I didn't create it. Gino Wickman created it. I am what's called an implementer. So, an implementer of EOS is someone that works with leadership teams to
Mhm.
help them implement EOS into their business. And EOS just stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's basically a way of getting aligned with three key things in your business. So, the first thing is that we get really clear on our vision. So, where is it we're going and how are we going to get there? And how do we make sure all of our people are also on the same page? The second piece of it is that we make sure we instill traction in our business so that we're executing on that vision with real discipline, real accountability, and that, everywhere you look, you see that vision being rolled out. And then the third thing is we call it healthy. So it's keeping our teams healthy. In a scaling business, for all the reasons we just talked about, sometimes relationships strain. Sometimes people burn out. And the biggest thing that tends to suffer early on is team dynamics and team health. So we want to make sure that if we are scaling, if we've got this big vision and we are getting there using traction, we do it in a way that's healthy for ourselves and for our teams. And we make sure that we keep everyone's psychological safety top of mind. And then when you've got a healthy team is your number one competitive advantage against any industry in any. You can dominate anywhere if you've got a healthy team. So it's those three things the system really helps entrepreneurial leadership teams um, get better at doing. And while if someone's in startup or if they're a solopreneur, they can certainly use aspects of the EOS, the framework. They can certainly use aspects of the six key components. It's really suitable. It's really the sweet spot for businesses who are, 10 or more people. And they're kind of fast growth. They've gone past sort of, $1, $2 million a year in revenue because they'll start to hit some really predictable problems. And what the system does is it addresses those predictable problems and helps get over them.
Hmm. That is something I learned, and it is across the industries and verticals, right? Like, I mean, it's agnostic.
Yeah, it's industry agnostic. So, I mean, I work with a number of different teams, everything from, performance arts all the way to engineering to hospitality. It really doesn't matter because what matters is it's basically it's to do with how you run your business and running it better and getting better, faster, stronger. So that those are the things that it really supports and helps with.
Hmm. So, Rani, before we conclude, if listeners they would like to connect with you and you know explore your work, your resources,
Yeah.
what the easiest way?
The easiest way is for sure follow me on LinkedIn. I put a lot of stuff out on LinkedIn on a daily basis, and I want to make sure that again it's in the spirit of service. I do have a newsletter that I just started, so I'm sending stuff out every Thursday that's relevant. They're kind of it's experiences I'm having personally and professionally, but also how we use some of these tools to get better at running better business, live a better life. So you Yeah, so follow me on LinkedIn, and that's probably the easiest way.
Superb, superb. So, listeners, I'll have the links and details in the show notes. So, go and check out Rani's resources, her newsletter, connect with her on LinkedIn. Feel free to share your thoughts. And also, before we wrap up, I think if I can summarize, scaling a business, it's not about the strategy or the financial aspect, the revenue, or hitting the next milestone. I think what we explored today through Rani's insights and her journey, it's about the human side. It's about how we carry our energy, how we navigate ego, and how we care for our emotional well-being while we grow. So thank you so much, Rani. This was really, really a much needed conversation.
Well, a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Listeners, until next time, subscribe to BizBlend Podcast. Leave us a review. Share this episode with your fellow founder friends, or for with your friends and family and anyone. And also, if you take one thing from today, I think it should be scaling sustainably isn't about losing yourself. It is about showing up fully, honestly, and humanly. Until next time, thank you so much for tuning in. And this has been your host, Sana.